Welcome back, everyone. Well, in this video, we're going to be taking the next step for fleshing out our procedural foliage volume. That's going to be dealing with the instance settings. The instance settings are where you want to go to often fix up a lot of the performance issues with your level as it pertains to foliage types. All right. Before we get started in earnest here, I'm going to increase the size of our procedural foliage volume. So here in placement mode, I'm going to select the procedural foliage volume here. And I'm going to find my brush setting area, and I'm going to increase the X bounds to be 50,000. The Y to be 50,000. And you can see how that stretched out my yellow box out here. And then I'm going to click the re-simulate button to make it so that we have a whole forest out there. Okay, with a giant forest of densely populated trees, I am going to jump in and play. And while we are playing, you can see in the upper right here that my frame rate is stuttering big time, about 10 frames per second. If you don't remember how to get on that frames per second counter, all you got to do is tap the tilde key. That's the one directly to the left of your 1 key, and type in stat FPS. Now, because I have it turned on, if I hit enter and do this console command again, it turns it off. But I do want it on, so I'm going to type that in one more time. Stat FPS, and enter. And so you can see we're running at a strong 10 frames per second at best. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is if I try to run my character into a tree, I am just passing right through it. And yes, my game is stuttering bad. That is not your camera. All right, so let's escape out of here and fix this by coming through our foliage types instance settings. Now remember, our procedural foliage spawner asset has 1 foliage type asset in it currently. We're going to add more in future videos. Our tree. I'm going to click right here to browse to our tree in the content browser. And then we're going to double click on our tree to open it up. And as you remember before with our foliage types, down here we have some instance settings. Now let's address that no collision issue. Currently our collision preset is set to no collision, so let's set that to be block all. And then again, a real easy way to get some performance back is to turn off shadows. Shadows are always expensive, so if I just turn off our shadows here, that should get us some performance back. Now, I realize that this is ridiculous, that you normally do want to have shadows for trees. I would anyways. But this is just for academic purposes. However, for things like grasses, flowers, bushes, consider turning off your shadows. All right, with these changes made, I'm going to save. We're going to jump back into our level. And I'm going to hit play. And you can see that now we're up about 40 frames per second. You may have a different frame rate depending on the power of your computer, but you should see an increase in performance. And you can see that I am in fact colliding with their tree. Now, another setting that you are going to want to set for any foliage type included in your procedural foliage spawner is the call distance settings. Right now, I am far away from my forest here. Now you can see even if I zoom way out here, those trees still appear. Now trees are probably a foliage type that you do want to see from a far distance, but things like grasses, trees, bushes, etc., you do want those to fade away, to be called off the further you get away from them, so you can keep your game's performance running high. Now again, I'm doing this just for academic reasons. I am going to set my trees to eventually disappear at a given distance. So let's come under our foliage type tree, and let's set our cull distance something other than 0, because 0 means it's just going to always be there. I'm going to set the min distance to be something like 10,000, and it's going to set my max to be 10,000 as well. And so now you can see that a lot of my trees have already disappeared, the ones that are more than 10,000 Unreal units away from my camera. And as I kind of hold down the right mouse button and use the W, A, S, and D keys to fly around here, they start to fade into view. Now this tree, its material is already set up in such a way that it will fade in at a given distance, kind of like we manually had to set up for our bushes material. Okay, so that is another way that you can improve your procedural foliage spawner's performance, is ensuring that you're setting that cull distance for any foliage types you have set in your procedural foliage spawner. For now, I'm going to set my tree's cull distance to be a minimum of, we'll say, 30,000 and a maximum of 50,000. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save that, and let's see what this looks like back here in the editor. As I kind of zoom far away, you can see them starting to peel off the further they get away. Again, you know, that's not perfect, but again, for academic purposes, that's not too bad. All right, guys, we are knocking out our procedural foliage spawner one thing at a time here. In our next video, we're going to talk about the procedural foliage spawners, foliage types, cluster settings. We'll see you there.